For more insight, let's bring in Vice President of National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, James Carafano. Thanks for being with us here today. Important to have your perspective at this devastating time. And as we're learning more about the suspect, who we're not naming here in this case, many law enforcement are noting the striking similarities between how this was carried out and the tactics we've seen at the hands of ISIS, even seeming to borrow straight from the ISIS playbook of dying live in reference to killing while live streaming. We hear the NYPD talking about that in New York. They've coined that phrase. What do you see here? Well,
that's a trend that we've seen growing for decades. The Tamil Tigers kind of invented suicide bombing, and Islamist terrorists picked it up just because there's a technique. So as this information proliferates, we see this all the time. People learn by what other people do. If you looked at ISIS, for example, ISIS was the textbook of learning from other groups, massing all those tactics together and employing them. So not surprising to see other kinds of terrorist groups mimic exactly the same behavior.
And getting it offline, too, that has been such an important part of this. I mean, some of these social networks are still having trouble getting the video off.
Cows way out of the barn. I mean, this notion of somehow managing content as the solution to keeping this information out of people's hands, I just think that's a loser strategy.
All right. Well, intelligence sharing between law enforcement around the globe has never been more important than it is right now, yet this main suspect was never on any watch list that we have been told. Everybody's doing the checks. He made sure, though, to make his alleged white supremacist ideology known before and during, after this live stream attack, and claimed he spent 2 years in the planning. So what's the takeaway there of how we can know about these folks?
Well, intelligence and information sharing is not a panacea, but it is simply the most significant and important global tool for countries to work together. So where New Zealand is unique is it's part of something called the Five Eyes. It's the United States, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, and New Zealand, who seamlessly share information more tightly than any other group of countries on the entire planet. And not only do we do it on the intelligence side, there's also an immigration enforcement, border security side where there's similar type sharing. So New Zealand is privileged in that it is probably one of the countries that has the greatest access to law enforcement information and intelligence.
All right. Well, we'll be learning more as we move on throughout this investigation. I want to switch gears to U.S. Secretary Mike Pompeo. He's traveling to the Middle East next week. He'll be making a stop in Israel ahead of the Trump administration's unveiling of the Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. So as we take a look at his travel plans, what do you expect?
Boy, there's so much on the plate, not just the peace plan itself. To be honest, I don't think anybody thinks the peace plan is going anywhere. What it does demonstrate is the United States is serious. It's working in good faith. And someday there'll be people that want peace and they'll sit down at the table and maybe they'll use that plan. But on the Palestinian side, nobody's interested in that plan. But it's important that the United States plays that proactive, constructive role. But there's so many other things to talk about, particularly on what's going on in Syria, how to deal with Iran, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of issues that they'll be addressing.
We'll be able to get to all of it?
I think so. The U.S.-Israeli relationship in the last 2 years under this administration has just, the amount of cooperation and integration is just really incredible, and it's had a positive effect on the ground. People forget how quickly, how better off we are and this region is today as it was 2 or 3 years ago.
And quickly, I want to ask you about timing. It's everything, right? And it's very important. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's a close ally of the Trump administration, is up for re-election April 9th. Is the timing of Pompeo's visit a coincidence?
Look, I think it's driven by the facts, not by the politics. The reality is America's going to have a powerful, strong, integrated relationship with our most important ally in the region, regardless of who's running the country.
Okay. James Carafano, thanks for being here with us today, sharing your perspective. Always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leland.